Hi, welcome back to our VRED industry blog, and in this episode I'll be walking you through data import and setup. Okay guys, so normally when I'm working in Alias, when I'm using VRED, I'll be taking my data in from very early on in the project. I tend to use VRED as a fresh set of eyes on any job that I'm working on. It just lets me look at the data differently. You know, I get used to seeing it in Alias and I spot certain things, but you know, there's always a case where you're looking at it from a different media, where you see fresh things, you maybe see things that you can look to refine and enhance a bit better. And obviously because VRED's got better sort of shading, lighting and sort of shadow properties, it's a nicer tool in which to review the data. So I'll pull it in early, and I'll be doing that throughout the process. So normally the first thing I do in Alias when I want to do that is if I've picked my object, what I want to do first of all is I want to just check that the surface normals are okay, make sure that they're all kind of pointing the right way. It doesn't matter if you miss a few because you can fix them in VRED, but basically you want to make sure that model's blue rather than yellow so that the normals are all around the right way. And then while I've got the data picked, I'll zero transforms it to delete any transformation history. I'll put a little pop-up icon on the final demo to explain where that is. But I'll also be looking to, where we are, I'll go delete null nodes as well. Because obviously as you're constructing geometry, you'll build up certain groups and associations which will all get pulled into VRED. But perhaps some of these are dead nodes, they've got nothing inside them or it's not structured nicely. So generally within Alias, those are the setup things that I'll do up front before I pull things in and then save the file out. So at the other end, when we're looking at VRED, early doors, we've got a completely empty scene here, there's nothing going on at the moment. We'll just go File Import and let's pull that data in that we've just seen. Now this is the standard VRED import settings. What I'll normally do is make sure that tessellation quality, for me, I'll work with it on low. That's fine for the kind of work I do and for large scale automotive products. That controls the mesh density, and that starts to become important when you're working with things like VR, real-time work later on. If the mesh is very, very dense, the model will run slower. You'll be laggy and it'll be hard work. It'll give you a headache running in VRED. It'll make your processor work harder. And the other box that I also make sure that I untick is the keep surface data box. I don't really need the surfaces running inside VRED. I just want the meshes. So once I've got those two boxes ticked on the standard import, we'll just go import on that and it will churn away. Not for very long, it's very quick at getting things meshed and pulling things in, stitching things, unifying, tessellating it, getting it into the scene, and there we go. So that's raw out of Alias straight into VRED. And what I'll normally do at this point is maybe just pull in something into the scene graph. If we're looking at this now, I'll maybe create a direction light, something like that, just so that we can get a little bit of sense of sort of shadow direction in there. We'll maybe look to transform that a little bit to rotate it so it's sort of coming off axis a little bit so you get shadows off to one side. And then maybe as part of that process with the lighting rig, we'll boost that. So we're looking at that directional light. Maybe take the intensity of it up to 10, just so we get a little bit more in the way of sort of shadows and highlights. But this is just for preliminary checks. It's just so that we can pan around the model. But even at this stage, you know, there's things we can do. If we're looking at that scene graph and we just pan around the model, then you know we notice that I hadn't had symmetry switched on in Alias. So we want to get used to navigating that scene graph. Now I know with the wireframe switched on that that layer called Fux is where the wheels are kept. Now it doesn't matter if you've not got symmetry on that when you export it from Alias, because you can go edit, duplicate, and you can mirror through centerline, mirror through Y if you need to. You could clone it if you want to, but for now I'll mirror it, so that puts your wheels on your other side. That's pretty good. And again, the other thing you want to start checking fairly early doors is let's have a look at our face normals. So there's a few in here that aren't quite right. So if I hold down Alt whilst I'm in that mode and left click, that turns it to green. In VRED, everything wants to be green. So where you've got purple, you want to swap those to their green. So there's a few little bits in here that aren't quite right. But for the most part, that's all tidy. And surface normals will affect things later on when it comes to rendering and the way certain shaders react. So it's not a bad idea to just be in the habit of getting the data set up like that. So we're up, we're running, but these are the raw Alias shaders. And if we go into our materials library now, we want to convert some of those because VRED just automatically has built in better shader properties. So if we go to that body blue shade now, which is active, if we go in there and we go convert to a true light material, let's make that a metallic car paint, which automatically just in VRED straight away gives you more pop. Now obviously we can play games with that a little bit in terms of the setup, but here again things like this, that fucks. Let's turn it into a convert to a true light material. Maybe we could try it as a brushed metal, so you're going to get the effect of that a little bit nicer. You get the glossy in there. We can turn on a bit of roughness, which just sort of flattens it out a little bit, but gives it that sort of brushed finish. It's coming, you know, already just a few mouse clicks in, you got something that looks a bit more like. Maybe on the light lenses, you want to give them a hint of incandescence, so you know they look like they've got a little bit of glow going on. You may want to set up sub layers within that to give a better feel, but you can play with glow on the actual lenses or do it on the sub elements within it. But very quickly already, you know, you've got something that for sort of surface evaluation purposes and just getting a feel for what design's doing is a little bit better. Maybe we'll come back to that blue and just lighten it off a little bit so you can get a better read of what the surfaces are doing. But I find that's a useful means of just assessing the data. And after, you know, spending 2 or 3 hours in Alias, you know, just getting the next round of data done, it's very useful to just pull it into VRED and just check. You know, we're not planning at this stage on doing any output renderings. We're not going to do anything cute with it. But it's just giving me a fresh way to look at the data I've got, examine highlights, look at the way it's running. And obviously, because it's VRED, you know, we can get into a little bit of ray tracing and just sort of see how areas that would fall into shadow are behaving, just to make sure we like those characteristics. And this could be done with the most basic data set, but you know, you can look at regions such as like the rear lights where things are sort of dropping into shadow. You can just look at the play of highlights over a surface. And for me, that's a nice way to review the data. And at this preliminary stage of the modelling process, you know, we can begin to be setting up camera views. We can be looking in here. We can create a track in here, which is basically the same as bookmarks and Alias. We can then just sort of capture particular viewpoints. And the nice thing is once those viewpoints are established, as I'm sure you appreciate, you know, as you're going through that modelling process, you know, they could be in this file for life. So if you want to show the design maturing over a series of iterations, you've always got those bookmark views in which you can compare the design. But as we're looking at this in the scene graph, you know, currently in here, it's raw out of Alias. You're finding that there's things in here where you've got offsets, you've got symmetry that comes across from Alias. It can be quite messy to navigate as the file gets bigger and more complicated if you want to swap components out, if you want to get into particular details. So there's a slightly different workflow that I'd use further on in the process when I'm coming into the final stages of data preparation and pulling files through, which I'll walk you through next. And that's about getting the data really set up for proper visualization. Okay, so now for the sake of argument, we're further along in our development process and we've got an exterior model that's now pretty much complete. We've got an interior in there as well. This is basically the data set that we want to take into VRED to start getting into more final renders and perhaps some VR work with the client to showcase the design. So the difference is when I'm exporting from VRED this time is I choose not to export with symmetry switched on in Alias. I know I've got panels that I want to make symmetrical in VRED, but I prefer to handle that in VRED so that the structure of the file comes out altogether cleaner, it's easier to manage. So what I've basically done is done an export of that file, and if we come into VRED now, this is the original early file we did. What we'll do if we just switch that off, we can file, import, and we can pull in the next round of data. Again, I'll leave those settings as they were. We'll keep the tessellation low and the surface data switched off. Let's pull that file in. But what we're going to do is get this file slightly more organised in terms of its structure. So we're not so much talking about shader setup, but we're talking about making the most of the scene graph to get things tidy. So now we've got this second file pulled in. And what we'll do is maybe we'll pick all the layers within it, and we'll group those, Control-Shift-G, and we'll call that V2, version 2. Yeah, so what we can do is looking in this file, we've got various things coming over from layer conventions and names from Alias. Now some of these things, we've got asymmetric layers, we've got things that we know we want symmetry on, but we want to maybe get a bit more organisation in the file, want to get a bit more grouping. We know that NURBS 3, that's our main bodywork layer, so what we could do is we could go edit, duplicate, you could go mirror white flush on that, so you got your NURBS, and you could pick that, and you could group that, and we could call that exterior bodywork. Bodywork, yeah, there's a chunk of it there. But the main aim is what we've done. We can either mirror it, but we can duplicate it. But is to get to the point where we've got each panel sorted out, and we can Control-Shift-M to merge it, so that we've just got a nice high-level mesh for each component. So here you can see it's within a group, but we can merge that. For certain things where we're talking about for assigning shaders, the way I've modelled it in Alias, the way the data is currently set up, if for example we look at these mini lights by just looking at those in isolation, the wheels themselves, we can see they're segmented. You know, we got various nodes in here, but they're all segmented. So another useful thing to do is if we go Control Shift and pick all the spokes of the wheel, and we go Control Shift M, we can merge that. So now I've just got one nice mesh when we come to pick it. And again, with the wheel segments, again, the way I've modelled it, that's modelled in 4, but we can revolve that into one clean bit, which when it comes to assigning shaders, when it comes to swapping things in and out, just makes the job much easier. So we can unisolate that and potentially look at other areas of the vehicle. But what we've currently got in here as well is we know I've got 2 wheel types. I've got the mini lights that I've just shown you, and I've got the original Fuchs or Fuchs wheels from the design. So what we want to do is get into switches. So potentially, if we go in here and go create a switch, we could call this wheel options. Yeah, now that's just a high level switch, and within it we can simply drag and drop what's going on in there. So you're basically setting yourself up so you've got an either or condition. So you've either showing the Fuchs wheels or the mini lights, which again, you know, just helps when you're starting to get into organising the file and being able to quickly cycle through variants. That's an important part of being able to navigate in VRED. And that's where this scene graph starts really becoming your friend, because you know we could add in any number of wheel options, we could import them separately at any point in the project, and as long as we're dragging and dropping them into that switch, you know, you could have material variants, you could have spoke variants, you could have all sorts of variants in there, and it's very easy to control and organise. But it's really a case of going through the file and getting to the point where we're happy with what we're doing with it. Okay, well, thanks for watching. I hope you found that useful, and we'll see you on the next episode.